Every single day, we use water. We turn on the tap, we flush the toilet, we don't even think about it. But have you ever stopped and wondered about the incredible, totally invisible journey that water takes just to get to you? And then where it goes after you're done with it? Well, today, we're going to pull back the curtain on that hidden journey.
It really boils down to that simple question, right? And the answer is surprisingly complex. It involves some of the most important life-saving engineering on the entire planet. And that one question? It actually splits our water story right down the middle into two very different parts: the journey to your tap and the journey from your drain.
So to get our heads around all this, we're going to do something kind of cool. We're going to follow just one single drop of water. We'll track it all the way from a river through this massive, complicated purification system to your house, and then all the way through a totally different cleaning process before it's finally safe to go back to the environment. Okay, let's dive in. Before we can really appreciate how water gets cleaned, we first have to understand what we're actually fighting against. You see, raw water from a river or a lake isn't just pure H2O. Nope, it's carrying a whole bunch of unwanted hitchhikers.
So environmental engineers basically break all these impurities down into three main buckets. First, you've got the physical stuff. This is the gunk you can see, like silt and debris, the things that make water look all cloudy. Then there's the chemical category. This is the dissolved stuff, things like metals or organic compounds. And finally, and this is a big one, you have the biological hitchhikers. We're talking living microorganisms, some of which can be seriously dangerous.
And here's what's so interesting about that physical cloudiness. We call it turbidity. It's not really a measure of how much stuff is in the water, but how that stuff messes with light. Think about it. A single little pebble in a glass of water, barely any turbidity. But what if you crush that same pebble into thousands of microscopic particles? Suddenly, the water is super cloudy. That cloudiness is the key physical challenge we need to solve.
And this is the big one: pathogens. These are the invisible biological threats. The nasty bacteria and viruses that can cause horrible diseases like cholera and typhoid. Getting rid of these is, without a doubt, the #1 most critical job of water treatment. It's all about protecting public health.
All right, so let's jump into the first half of our journey. How do engineers take that raw, cloudy, potentially dangerous river water and turn it into the crystal clear, safe stuff that comes out of your tap?
So here's the core problem with that cloudiness: the turbidity. Most of those teeny tiny particles floating around have a negative electrical charge. It's literally like trying to push the negative ends of two magnets together. They just push each other apart. And what that means is they will stay suspended in the water pretty much forever. They'll never just settle to the bottom on their own.
To solve this, engineers came up with this brilliant 4-step process. First up, coagulation. This is where they tackle that charge problem. They add chemicals that neutralize the particles, which lets them start sticking together in bigger and bigger clumps called floc. Step 2, sedimentation. Now that we have these bigger, heavier clumps, we just let gravity do the work. In a big, quiet tank, all that heavy floc just sinks to the bottom. Simple. Step 3 is filtration, kind of like the polishing step. The much clearer water on top flows through layers of sand and gravel, which catches any tiny particles that were left behind. And finally, the most crucial step, disinfection. This is the safety net. Something like chlorine is added to kill off any dangerous pathogens that might have made it through the first 3 steps.
Okay, so our drop of water has been used. Maybe it went down the kitchen sink or got flushed, and now it's swirling down the drain. This kicks off the second, and just as important, half of its journey: wastewater treatment. And you gotta remember, the goal here is completely different. We're not trying to make it drinkable again, we're just trying to make it safe enough to go back into the environment. Now, the main pollutant we're worried about in wastewater is organic waste, all the stuff we flush, and the way we measure it is with something called biochemical oxygen demand, or BOD. Just think of it like this. BOD is basically a measure of how much food is in the water for bacteria. So a high BOD means there's a lot of pollution. If you just dump that into a river, the microbes would go nuts, eat all that food, and use up all the oxygen in the water, which is really, really bad news for fish and aquatic life.
So how in the world do we lower that BOD? Well, this is the really cool part. Instead of fighting biology, we use it to our advantage. Wastewater treatment plants are basically giant farms for good bacteria. We create the perfect conditions for these microscopic cleanup crews to just thrive and do what they do best: eat all the organic pollution in the water.
The whole thing is basically a 1-2 punch. First up is primary treatment. This is a physical process.
Just like we saw before, the wastewater sits in a huge tank, and good old gravity pulls the heavy solids down to the bottom. That gets rid of about half the gunk right there. But then comes the main event, secondary treatment. This is the biological stage. This is where we let our cleanup crew, those amazing microorganisms, get to work and feast on all the dissolved organic waste. This is what really tanks the BOD level, before the water gets disinfected and is finally safe to release.
All right, so we've followed our little drop of water on this wild ride through these two totally different, super complex journeys. But what's the big takeaway here? Why does all this invisible engineering matter so much to every single one of us?
To put it simply, these systems are the absolute foundation of modern public health. Water treatment is the reason we don't have to worry about deadly waterborne diseases like cholera anymore. And wastewater treatment is what protects our rivers and lakes from becoming polluted, oxygen-starved, dead zones. Together, they make modern cities and modern life even possible. It's truly life-sustaining, world-changing work that happens completely out of sight.
But the journey isn't over, not by a long shot. As our world keeps growing and we face new challenges like weird chemical contaminants, this engineering has to keep evolving. The next great chapter is all about closing the loop, finding new ways to purify wastewater so well that we can actually reuse it, turning this whole journey from a straight line into a sustainable circle. It really makes you wonder, what's the next big breakthrough going to be?